Hi everybody, welcome back to Fresh Outlook. I'm TWB. Well, some FBI documents were released this week and they shed some new light on how the government surveils those it sees as possible security threats. Like, for example, the Occupy Wallstreet movement. Take a look.
In an important week for civil liberties in the Obama administration, newly surfaced FBI documents revealed how the agency systematically spied on Occupy Wall Street and other nonviolent protest movements. The release shed some new light on how the FBI collaborated with other federal agencies, including the Department of Homeland Security, to keep tabs on the movement, which it considered a potential criminal and domestic terrorism threat. Yet the documents, obtained under the Freedom of Information Act, are also heavily redacted and leave much to the imagination.
Right, there's a lot of talk that these documents were, like they just said, heavily redacted. We're not really sure what happened, but let's just go back to the beginning part of that piece. The government spied on those at the Occupy Wall Street movement. The FBI is involved. I don't have a problem with it. I absolutely agree that the FBI should have been involved, that we should have been. This is a major movement in the United States.
Yeah,
I mean,
but you'd have a big problem with it, Taryn, if you were considering showing up to a demonstration.
I was there. I covered it. I was there multiple days. Yeah.
But you were there covering it. You weren't there as a demonstrating, were you?
No, but I was there for a long time with them.
All I'm saying is I wonder, see how this stuff got leaked and whether this is some kind of a preemptive thing to keep kind of the mainstream Americans out of that movement once it resurfaces, and it will. Look, I went to college in the late 60s, early 70s when everyone knew that we were having dossiers made out on us in that era and for the things that we were doing. I don't know why this comes as a surprise to people.
Yeah, were you surprised, James?
No, it's not news really. I mean, if you look at where the initial Occupy movements were set up and how they were in their proximity to the resources of Wall Street and so on and so forth, it's natural that the FBI would have to do this kind of investigation. Folk in the movement also understood they were being surveilled. It was not news to the folk in the movement as well either. But I think it's interesting that Occupy sort of garnered that kind of attention. It suggests the sort of seriousness with which our government takes that particular movement. And I think it also suggests the kind of impact they've had on our society in a very short period of time.
It wasn't just New York City.
It was all over the country.
It was big and it was fast.
And it was partially inspired by the events in other countries as well that were, more Eastern, Middle Eastern countries. Look, I too was covering it on September 17th. I'll remember the day until I die. 2011, down at Bowling Green, when people were just really sort of trying to get their voices heard, get out there and just sort of say they were dissatisfied with what had happened. And a lot of the backhand deals that had been going on with banks and with insurance companies and with the mortgage lenders, all of the stuff that you see coming up now with the fiscal cliff, with what happened with AIG recently, with what happened with Bank of America and these settlements and this hush money. And I know we're going to talk about that later, but the whole idea is they were trying to come together to have a voice against some of that. Now, are we going to go back to McCarthyism? Are we going to go back to, sort of pegging people as being, outrageously communistic or that kind of a thing? Is that the kind of surveillance? Are we Alvin Toffler, 1984? Are we going to,
well, were First Amendment rights suppressed at all? Were they? I mean,
well, they were suppressed when they were shut down because the police did shut them down. There was a lot of talk.
And the different things they tried to use to shut them down and move the movement around.
Like what?
I mean,
telling them they couldn't be in public parks, telling them they had to leave so they had to come in and do all these big cleanups and then not letting them come back in, right? There were a lot of little smaller cases of police harassment and police brutality around the edges of Occupy.
And having witnessed some of those scuffles firsthand and seeing people pulled away in zip ties and in handcuffs and that kind of thing because they were right in front of me when I was reporting on it, there is some of that was provoked and there was some of that wasn't. There was some of that was frankly, people sort of going beyond what they needed to do in order to, make a silent protest or to make their voices heard with their First Amendment rights, and some of it that didn't. So
some of these redacted documents, though, reveal that the FBI was communicating with financial institutions about Occupy. Was that relevant? I mean, why?
You're talking about places that are housing the resources of the world, and this thing, you're right, it's international, and so the federal folk have to be involved in that. Again, not surprising. If it were being used in some kind of blackballing fashion, if the government were sort of prosecuting these people now and putting them on trial now and incarcerating them for the organizational sort of piece of the process, we could probably be a little bit more sensitive about it, but it makes sense here. Occupy did what they needed to do. The government's going to surveil you and try to figure out how.
And I think
I
think it's far more subtle than we're even saying that it is. And I think that actually, as mainstream Americans
this.
feel suppressed,
Right.
feel actually prevented from getting involved because they may have a dossier made out on them. This is going to marginalize the movement still further. And I think that's the fear.
Yeah.
Because back in the 60s, this became a worldwide movement,
Right.
what we were involved in. And I think that the powers that be, whoever they are,
Right.
whether it's Bilderberg or whether it's, you know, whoever it is, that they don't want this actually to take shape as a worldwide movement, because that's going to have massive effects
Everything
on
comes back.
everyone.
Sure.
No one
60s
wants
the
that.
60s of the new 2000s, or 2000s of the new
It's
60s.
the potential of being that.
I want to talk about for a moment the National Defense Authorization Act. On Wednesday, President Obama signed it. What I found interesting was basically he defended this authorization minus indefinite detention bans, whereas last year he signed it, and basically he had said in his signature last year, I want to clarify that my administration will not authorize the indefinite military detention without trial of American citizens. He wrote this last year. This year he signed the exact same bill and didn't mention that. How could he do that? What?
Well, he likes black ops. Let's be honest.
Is it because he
about
doesn't
That's
care?
his style.
He won the re-election, so he doesn't need to add that little asterisk?
Well, WJ is right. And it's look, he got bin Laden, and look how he got bin Laden. Zero Dark 30 is a sort of loosely adapted from reality a look at how that happened. And you're right. He has a preference for being more surgical in how you prosecute the war on terror. Now, the problem with him signing the NDA at all is just that it feels like civil liberties are under attack here. And the fact that the fact that he has to say that his administration would never use that particular policy scares the mess out of me, because
once you put it out there and you highlight it, it's like,
because we're already thinking, well, how will a different administration deal with that kind of sort of leverage and power in terms of detaining
Whatever
Americans?
happened to habeas corpus.
Right.
Yeah. No, really. I just think that it sets us up for a tough road in terms of fair trials. I mean, if you can't guarantee a trial and you're just going to, indefinitely detain someone for however long that you choose, I think that sets up a really troubling precedent for the future in terms of legalities, rights, because these are U.S. citizens. We're not talking about foreign nationals. We're talking about U.S. American citizens.
And we allegedly hate countries that do this kind of stuff.
Right.
Where it seems un-American, and it seems an approach
like the drone attacks, I think that again it sets us up internationally for trouble in terms of what are our international laws, in terms of what is just, what isn't, and whose rules are we playing by? Are we above the law?
Also, people are upset that Guantanamo, it lays out this idea that Guantanamo cannot be shut down, something that Obama pledged that he would. So
it's not going
But
anywhere.
that's what you do. What you do is you say you close it and you keep it open. That's what everyone does. And that's what the you just do.
Terrible.
welcome to our country. Welcome to our country.
It turns out that we do have to have it open, because when he tried to close it, but he went to several different states to figure out if there were any states that would take a supermax prison that would house the prisoners that they weren't able to let go. No states could get the political will to do that. So what do we do?
All right, what are we going to do? We're going to go to break. That's what we need to do. When we come back to Fresh Outlook, good news for underwater homeowners. We'll explain next on Fresh Outlook. Stay with us.